Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé F1 podcast number 798, the Belgian Grand Prix review. You know who this is. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA a Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here, and you know how we do these race weekends, of course.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
Yeah, come on. That's what we do. But before doing any of that, I have to go out and actually find someone that knows what they're talking about. So I have to introduce my co-host tonight. You know him.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, I got to say right up the top of the podcast, I am not talking to just my dear friend Paul Charsley. I happen to be talking to the sporting manager of the Heart of Racing team who just took the lead in the IMSA championship with their Aston Martin this weekend. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Great race at VR. What, you had a second place finish and a fourth,
Yep.
right?
And a fourth in pro. The pro one hurts a little bit because it was one I feel like we should have won, and some things went a bit wrong. But on the other side, the main push has been for the past few races the 27 car in GTD, which with Roman and Maxime Martin driving, and we've been gaining, and it's just blinkers on, man. Let's go for the championship, and we finally got into the lead after all these races, because we had a terrible first 3 races of the year, and all the rest of the year has just been trying to play catch up, and we finally achieved that. So going into a great position into the final race at Petit in a few weeks.
Yeah. You're going to go to the Petit Le Mans. That's going to be exciting. And it's, I don't know, Paul, they always say this in Formula One, they always ask, but I'm going to ask you the same question in IMSA.
Yeah.
As you and Ian, the team manager, you take this team into the Petit, is it better to be the chased, or is it better to be the chaser for the final race in the championship?
Oh, it's better to be the chased.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
You can control a little bit what goes on, and the pan. You're always at the top of your game for sure going into those kind of races, but you've got a little cushion, so it opens up some options that if you're chasing, you've only got one option, which is to throw it all out there. So
Yeah.
And we know who our competition is, and we know they're behind us. So it's not a big cushion by any means.
It's not like a Max Verstappen cushion.
No, it's not like that at all. But it's better to be ahead than behind, I believe. So that's, as I said, that's always a good thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I was excited. I was trying to watch the race, and the only channel I could see it on, they kept pushing it back because some sort of NASCAR rain delay. So it was driving me nuts. So I'm just sitting there watching the race in timing and scoring.
Yeah, and the way we won it was nerve-wracking. I couldn't even watch the last 10 minutes. It was just because we won it basically by Maxime just on our last stint, saving fuel from the very first lap. And we've talked about that before in Formula One. It's like when you get a strategy, like a tire strategy, etc., you've got to start executing it from lap 1 out of the pits. And it's exactly what we did. And there was a lot of speculation on the commentators saying, oh, they just don't have the pace, I guess, right now. But it was all part of the bigger plan that ultimately we only got passed for the lead with 1 lap to go, basically, because the Mercedes had run a good strategy, but literally a full throttle strategy to catch us back up. But the others that we were dicing with were a few seconds back. So it's nice to execute it in maybe a different way, and that's absolutely what we did. Took a couple of kahunas, there, but we did it. So we were very happy.
Well, you guys read the tea leaves right, because that whole race seemed like it did turn into a fuel mileage race, a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, most of the races do to a degree, not necessarily on. Obviously, if you're going to reduce a pit stop, that's amazing, right? Which even in Formula One, they try and do that with tire strategy. But also, what fuel you don't use, you don't have to put in the car in a pit stop, and that shortens pit stops too.
Right.
Which is a thing that sometimes gets missed. So sometimes you're fuel saving just because you don't want to have to put as much fuel in, because that's the thing that takes the longest time in the pit stop is the fueling.
Right.
So,
Well, it's awesome. Big round of applause for Heart of Racing. Yes, leading the championship. I
Yeah.
said this moves in. You're like the Toto Wolff of IMSA now. I guess technically, since Ian's the team boss, he's like the Toto Wolff.
Yeah.
You must be the Bono or the Alan Permain to the Otmar
I
Snafauer.
don't know.
You know?
Yeah, I don't even. Maybe Otmar. That sounds good.
Yeah.
But I don't know where I am really. But
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
good. It
Oh,
was
that's awesome.
Ian's cool to go for that fuel strategy. So hats off to him.
Oh, hats off to Ian. Well, he's a wily old fox, that Ian James.
Yeah, we were going back a little bit. I had another idea, but I still think it would have worked. But we'll see.
Oh, that's
He was
yeah.
like, "Just go away, else I'll change my mind." I'm like,
You're optioning him to death. You
Yeah.
must have sounded like the Ferrari pit calling to Charles, like, I don't know, what tires
Yeah.
you want? Hard, medium, soft, so we can pit now, pit later?
Yeah.
What do you want to do? And Charles is out there, I don't know. Somebody look at the math.
yeah, it is true. You need one voice, and so I try not to
Yeah.
get too. You need to put the right people in the place that can make the decisions. But
Yeah.
just a few occasions, I'm saying maybe we might want to think about this.
Yeah.
So
Here's an
stuff.
idea. So that's good. Well,
Yeah.
in between taking the lead in the championship for the class in IMSA, which is exciting enough, and one of these days we may need to start an IMSA podcast just to
Yes.
talk about your exploits and shenanigans and goings on.
Right.
You know. But anyway, you managed to sandwich in and watch the Belgian Grand Prix from Spa-Francorchamps. Yes, it was held in Spa, not Bruges or Ghent or anything like that. It was down in Spa.
Yep.
Paul, did you know? No, I'm not going to go into the.
I did because I was there. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Did
did
rain
know.
once. That's why I'm
Yeah.
wearing my Heart of Racing Spa 24-hour shirt today.
There you go.
Right, just there a few weeks ago.
You were there just a few short weeks ago.
Indeed.
Yes.
Man, the crowd was fantastic, wasn't
Oh
it?
my gosh! Yeah.
Jeez, I cannot believe they're thinking about taking that race away. It's
Couldn't
just
believe it.
ludicrous.
Yeah, could not believe it. Because if you ask most of the fans, I'm not saying all, but if you ask most of the fans, and most of all the drivers will tell you this is one, if not the favorite track. And it's always been one of my favorites. And everybody, I've said this on past podcasts, we see people say, if you could go, to one race over in Europe, it'd probably be Monaco. And I said, that would be awesome. Don't get me wrong. But if I could only go to one, I'd like to see Spa.
Yeah,
think.
to watch the cars at Spa. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I just saw the GT cars going around, but I was picturing in my mind how fast a Formula One car would be going through a
Yeah.
Rouge and up Radeon. Be
Yeah.
blow your mind.
Yeah. And I'm assuming your drivers, when you were over there, had the same sort of feedback that the F1 drivers, and most of the F1 drivers, certainly in the past anyway, would say that Spa's one of the only tracks that give you the sense that you're actually going somewhere, instead of just kind of around a brief circle, but you're
Right.
going a long ways at Spa. And I don't know. I think it's been interesting over time to see which corners have become, for years it was Eau Rouge, which was daunting. That's flat. It doesn't make it still not difficult. It is. But now it's like Pouhon and out of Pouhon and the corner with no name, or the Jackie X corner, and now they named it. But anyway, Stavolo and a lot of those corners all have these wicked histories just as they've evolved. The cars have evolved and made different corners, kind of like R130. Not as daunting as it used to be, but Spoon Curve now is brutal, right? And,
Right. Yeah. I mean, definitely changed. The capabilities of the car definitely changed what the challenges are, but didn't make it less challenging because of that, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, sometimes you go into a really fast corner when you're like just on the edge and you're just cracking that foot on the throttle. They're the ones your heart is in your mouth and you're not breathing.
Yeah.
The technical stuff, that's one thing, but man, those corners that you're literally at the edge as nearly as fast as that car can go, but you're not there, but it's not planted. Yeah. That'll give you a rush every time, not just.
I mean, I know that the cars will handle it, but if you're going in full flat through Blanchimont, there's a little bit of tension there,
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of trust in that car that the back isn't just flip out,
Yeah.
And you got to have a car that's planted. Well, let's talk about the Belgian Grand Prix. It's one of my all-time favorites, and just as let's do a little table setting. So, as I mentioned, I had written an article over the summer talking about these FIA technical regulation tweaks that were due at Spa, and there was a lot of speculation, certainly for all the right reasons, about who may be impacted by these regulations, who may not be, and the prevailing notion is that it would help Mercedes and possibly hinder Ferrari and Red Bull. Now, leading up to the race, there was still porpoising, and it became clear that, over Friday and Saturday, that Red Bull didn't really seem impacted. In fact, they seemed quick as hell at Spa over the weekend, and certainly in the hands of Max Verstappen. As I stated in the article that I wrote, I was thinking that the impact, just purely my opinion, but I was thinking that the impact may not be fully seen at Spa or completely revealed at Spa, and that it may take time to manifest itself given the characteristics of Spa. And some of that was also suggested by Martin Brundle on Sky's broadcast when he said, really, the car's setup at Spa is really determined by handling Eau Rouge. The compression at Eau Rouge is going to force you to set up the car within a certain tolerance so you're not bottoming out. So it becomes the grand equalizer for the car. It has to be able to handle the compression at Eau Rouge, which they reduce slightly in the reprofile, and that's going to kind of determine the ride height. But that would have a lot to do with it anyway. Not sure if we've seen the extent of the impacts of the regulation tweak or not, but it was some sort of thought, well, wait a minute, judging by Red Bull's pace around here, it may have actually helped Red Bull, given their pace. I'm not sure I'm ready to write that on a rock either, but I do kind of wonder, Paul, if it didn't sort of reveal itself a little with Ferrari's really high degradation that they were having at Spa. Even on the hard tires, was that, I'm just speculating, was that a product of a higher ride height and a stiffer chassis in order to comply with the regulations, allowing that car to move around a lot more, adding more degradation? I don't know. I'm just speculating. But how did you see anything you thought, maybe that could be regulation tweak induced or not?
Yeah, I mean, it's true to say that everything is, each track can drastically have swings and roundabouts on how a car handles. Just look at what happened with McLaren this year at the beginning of the year. One race, literally, they couldn't get out of their own way. The next race, everything seemed fine. Right. The car didn't radically change that much. They didn't find
Mercedes at the Hungarian Grand Prix versus here.
Yeah. So, and this track is obviously very fast, right? So
power circuit.
With the Red Bull, it's fast in a straight line, which is kind of anti what Red Bulls always used to be, but that's something we're getting used to now, right? The Mercedes used to be the ones in the straight line. Right. Mercedes are now draggy. So, it really is hard to say here. I think the setup is dictated by Eau Rouge and just the nature of a very, very fast circuit where you're just going to kind of set your car up that way. So we'll have to see in a couple of races. And what's the next race?
Dutch Grand Prix, Zandvoort.
Okay. Yep. Well, that's going to be a little different. So, we'll be able to definitely see some differences there and see what happens. It's interesting when they talk about Eau Rouge, because whenever you go to a track, there's always a defining part of a defining corner that really you have to build your whole car from, right? Whether it's a bump that you have to hit in order to get through turn one at Sebring or something like that, that is a defining part that you cannot go below, and then you try and make the car work as well over there, and then try and build out the setup of the car from there. And Eau Rouge is so unique, and Raidillon obviously, that I don't think this is a great circuit to tell that. And I think the high speed nature of the circuit also is really just going to kind of show which pecking order everyone is in that determining factor on a car's speed.
How did you guys find Eau Rouge and the compression for the Aston Martins when you were there?
The GT cars that have a lot more problems than Formula One cars, because they don't have the downforce. Yeah. And there was a lot of problems with not just our car, but a lot of cars, actually getting through Raidillon without having to go to the inside curb, and there was a lot of cars having to bail out. So the cars move around a lot more, but obviously you're always measuring how much wear is on the under tray, etc., and you just keep lifting the car up till you get to that point, or you stiffen the springs up so the car doesn't move around quite so much. So they were okay, but it certainly wasn't probably our strong point, actually.
But just to paraphrase, I hope I'm paraphrasing correctly, but Eau Rouge became that benchmark that your team had to set the Aston Martin up. It's got to get through Eau Rouge. You can't avoid it.
Right.
So
right.
that became basically the benchmark, kind of what Martin was alluding to.
Yeah, that's where the car's
F1,
going to be most compressed, right? So you've got to get your car to be able to take that compression without bottoming out.
Yep.
Or wearing out, or gradually wearing some of the downforce out with the under tray, etc. So you just that's kind of got to be your stop point.
Right. So that's what all the teams had to work around, and that's what Martin was alluding to. It's a little bit of what I was alluding to in the article. I didn't think that Spa was going to necessarily reveal the entirety of the impact of the regulation tweaks. I think heading into Zandvoort, that will be interesting, because on the back of that, we've got a triple header here, Paul. On the back of that will be Monza, right? So this is a very high-speed circuit. So we're going to see a power circuit like Spa, a more traditional circuit, which could, air quote, favor Ferrari a little bit more and Mercedes a little bit more. And then we're going to go to Monza, which is a pure speed, power circuit again. So if we were going to have a litmus test, I think these three back-to-backs are going to be kind of interesting to see how this impacts it anyway. So.
Yeah, it is. And I know you said the porpoising was still there. It's not going to go away.
No.
It's just how big an impact it is. I mean, we remember in the 80s when the cars were hitting the skid plates, and I mean, it wasn't going away. It didn't seem as big a factor back then, but now everyone's just so hyper focused on it. But the cars are going to move around. The surfaces aren't billiard smooth, and you're going to see some of that because of the way the cars have to be set up to make use of that downforce. So.
Yeah, right. Also, certainly a lot of head scratching, and I kind of feel like the FIA or Formula One does need to figure out if they can make these engine penalties or the number of engines. We're going to have more races next year. It's evidently clear you can't make it through this year, and really you couldn't make it through last year on just 3 engines. So they're going to be taking penalties, but it did sort of water down qualifying. It made it very difficult. It took an abacus to figure out who the hell, who was going to start where, and it made it difficult. And I felt like we've moved. This wasn't as bad as it has been in the past. Remember back in the 2013, 14, 15, 16, remember when we were having those 35 plus grid penalties where,
carrying over to another race.
Carrying over. It was just ridiculous. So we've improved since then, to be fair to F1, but it is still pretty difficult to track. And with next year having more races, it seems like they need to try to figure something out. But the simple answer isn't, Paul, just saying, well, instead of 3, just make it 5, because as you and I were talking about before we recorded, if you give them 5, they're going to take 5 and they're going to add 6.
Yes, that's the nature of the beast, right? They're going to have that strategy. And it's really, I don't think the FIA or any of the teams expect to make it through a season on 3 engines. It's not even possible.
Right.
But it does give them a line that they then, if they cross, they then start getting their penalties. So it keeps them down here a little bit. But as you say, if you say it's 5, it's going to be 6 or 7 engines. They're willing to take 1 to 2 grid place penalties in the year to get more performance out of it. And if you strategize over when that is, and I would imagine the teams have a strategy for their engine changes, knowing that they're not going to get through 3, because you always have to have a strategy, and the strategy is always going to move depending on what's happened with the car. If you're getting you have a crash, whatever happened to Hamilton or this or that, and there's another opportunity to change the engine at a different time, then you do that. But I don't mind the engine penalty. As I said, I think it holds back. It's another discipline the engine manufacturers have to follow, and there has to be a line somewhere, and there has to be, once you go over that line, there has to be a penalty for it. I'm not sure we have to keep track of it. I'm more confused by all the other pieces on the car, not just the power unit. It's like the exhaust, the turbo, the electronic package. They've all got these time and distance limits on them, and that is hard to keep track of.
Yeah, it is.
Whether you can change it or you can't change it. So
Right.
but
Right.
I don't know. Is it for us to keep track of this stuff, or we just kind of have to accept it? But it is a way of keeping the F1 teams in check, I would say.
Yeah, I think going to more races next year, I think they are going to have to look at that, because three's not going to be enough. That means we're going to have a whole bunch of penalties frequently.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, they have to be realistic about it too.
Yeah, they need to be realistic.
You don't want people up to 6 engines when 3 is the limit, because then that's 3 races you're basically throwing away qualifying completely.
Yeah, so you need to be realistic about what can be achieved on the number of races and the reliability of that. And they have to factor in the haves and have-yots. And so you've got Williams, and can Williams make it through next year's calendar with 4 engines?
Yeah, Yeah, and I know you always like to, remember that some F1 fans haven't been around that long, but
I got chewed out for saying that, but yeah, I somebody was like, chewing me out for saying that.
But it's true. I mean,
it is, and keep in mind, for that particular person that was dogging me about that, keep in mind the whole reason I started this website back in 2005 was to create a safe harbor for new fans. So when I say that, he was saying, "Oh, you're always talking about new fans and old fans, like you guys have it all figured out, you veterans." Like, no, you're missing the point.
Yeah. I mean, we've been around a lot, that we've seen a lot happen. We certainly don't know it all. But I was just you harken back to the history of Formula One, where they used to have practice sessions. They had qualifying engines, and then they had race engines.
Right.
So basically, the mechanics would do 3 engine changes in a weekend minimum.
Right.
And now we're looking at 3 engine changes in a season. That's a massive, massive change.
It's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge.
I mean, literally, these engines were bombs they used to put in the cars. They were good for 3 laps, and then they were done. They were toast. They threw them in a bin.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way it used to be. Yeah. And Paul's right. If you're newer to Formula One, that's kind of the way that they would have that qualifying engine, qualifying setup. And then the race was a different engine completely. And they would cycle through tons of engines in a season. But keep in mind, they weren't as expensive to make as these current engines.
No, they weren't. They weren't.
And they were expensive.
Back then, they were quicker to change, for sure. They weren't as complex.
Yeah, right.
But as we know from Steve Matchett's books, they also didn't get a break.
Yeah, they were up all night, all weekend.
Weekend long. They they were pretty much knew it was 24 hours and then another 24 hours. They were always working because they had to.
Right.
And that's why these rules have evolved as they are now.
Yeah.
So,
which is good. I'm glad they did, but it could probably take a little review and some tweaking, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So let's jump into the race review. We head into this weekend. It became patently clear coming out of qualifying, no less anyway, that Red Bull and Max Verstappen certainly were quick. There was no doubt about it.
Just a wee bit.
Max ends up starting down in P14, if memory serves correctly, came all the way back through the field. So we'll talk about Red Bull first. You had Sergio Perez in P2, Max Verstappen P1 takes the victory. Was not my fantasy GP pick, by the way.
Mine neither.
What an idiot I am. I bizarrely, it was weird. I had Hamilton on the podium. But anyway, a stunning, if not demoralizing win for Max Verstappen. Started down at P14, came back to win the race in just a handful of laps, 18 or so. To be fair, he was, I know there's Max haters out there, and typically they tend to be Lewis Hamilton fans, and I get it. It's all fun. You all have your drivers, and you cheer for them, as you should. But to be fair, folks, this was a sublime race for him. He was patient early on, cut through the field, targeting passing 1 car a lap. He knew he couldn't let the leaders get too far out ahead of him, right? So he knew that. He cut his way back through the field on a recovery drive. I have to admit that I was watching that. This was not the petulant Max of old that we were watching. It was a seasoned, mature drive using his massive pace, his skill to measure his passes, got through without getting caught up in any of the chaos behind. He made progress without losing sight of the leaders. I got to be honest with you, Paul, I watched that and I was thinking at the end of that, dare I say, but it was very Schumacher-like what he did on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing what a good car does for you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not saying it's all car, because you measure up against Perez, who's no chump, and he did not have the same performance. So it's everything together, right? It's the team support, it's his experience, it's the car, supreme confidence. It's amazing. I mean, if you have confidence in yourself that you don't make those big lunges, you don't make those erratic choices when you're out there, because you have the confidence that it's all going to come to you. And that's exactly the mindset that Max Verstappen has right now. That he's just full of confidence. It's all going to come to him. So there's no panic.
Yeah.
I'll pick him off one at a time. That's fine. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah. I didn't pick him to win either. Feel stupid, because I was thinking, well, I don't know. Max is, got something going for him, but you just wouldn't think with the Ferraris being fairly close to Red Bulls, etc., that you would get there in time. I picked him to be on the podium, but not to win the race. So unfortunately, that doesn't give me any points.
I know.
But
I did miserable. Well, he took the lead after 18 laps. Set the fastest. He set the fastest lap, Paul, on medium tires. 12 laps from the end of the race. I mean, overall, it's hard not to suggest that it wasn't a sublime performance. By anyone's measure. And reading some of the comments from detractors of his, they said, "Oh, it's easy to do when when you're in the best car." And I'm thinking, well, okay, did you miss the last 8 years?
But I hate it when people say that, because drivers work for the right to drive the best car.
Yeah, that's right.
Using their talent to get them in the opportunity.
Yeah.
Right.
Just as Lewis did at Mercedes.
Just like Lewis, just as Nigel Mansell, he won his championship in a car that, maybe I could have driven a world championship. It was, I would never say, well, that you're not a proper champion because you didn't struggle with your car through the year. That's not how it works.
Right.
You struggle hard when you're a kid. You struggle hard when you're a youth, when you try to get yourself up the ladder. And if you excel in all those points and you get yourself in that seat, then you fully deserve the opportunity to drive the best car on the grid. And it's not always going to be the best car on the grid. I mean, he's been fighting tooth and nail for years without but still showing his skill level. And this is just where it's all coming together, which, as you say, we saw for many years with Lewis and the Mercedes, for sure.
Yeah, what you're seeing is that arc, folks. So, and if you've been watching for the last probably 6-7 years, then you've seen the petulant moves. You've seen him, clout people, and your detractors of Max will say, "Well, we'll still see that." Okay, that whatever. But if you look at his racecraft, it's coming into harmony with all of the tremendous amount of hard work of every man and woman at Red Bull, right? Very much the same that we saw with Lewis when he made that move out of McLaren. His racecraft got into Mercedes. His racecraft was peaking, got into Mercedes. Every man and woman in that Mercedes team elevated their game. They worked their tails off to deliver a car that could dominate, and boy, did it, right? For 8 years, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing that combination of a driver peaking at the right moment, worked his tail off to get to the best team, the best car, which Lewis did, and it paid massive dividends for the driver and the team. And now you're starting to see possibly something similar to that with Red Bull and Max. And, it's hard to take anything away from that.
Yeah, and it's hard to quantify, but when you're in a team and you have a driver that can deliver the goods, if you deliver the goods, it raises everyone's game, as you said. Yeah. So the good driver, the exceptional driver, raises the team level with him.
Right.
So
Right. And you've seen these moments, certainly Schumacher, Ferrari 2000, 2004, Hakkinen at McLaren 98, I'd argue really 96, 7 to 99, right? Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes the last 8 years, Sebastian Vettel at Red Bull 4 years. You've seen this driver team combination and everybody raising their game, and this is the beauty of Formula One. This is that ebb and flow. I mean, if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, I know you're not happy. I get it. If you're a Mercedes fan, you're not happy with the struggles they've had this year. But it is the ebb and flow of Formula One, and it is just part of the series. And and trust me, I speak from experience. I'm a Ferrari fan. I've been suffering for years. I'm suffering now. All right,
Yeah.
so I totally
more
get
than
it.
you should be, quite honestly.
Yeah,
but
more
yes.
than I should be.
Yeah.
Don't do this to me. Is this what you want? But yeah, it was a sublime race from Max, and hats off to him. My gosh, it was wonderful. Now Sergio, he had a bad start. He was pretty lined up, pretty aggressive on that starting grid, and it didn't work for him. He had a bad start. He struggled to get past Carlos Sainz. And it was telling by the time that Max caught him, he was literally holding Max up, from an under or overcut. And so he got around Max. However, Paul, I'm not taking the stuffing out of Sergio because he did exactly what the team needed him to do, which is finish right on Max's tail and give them a 1-2 finish, maximize the team points, and by his pace and due to the misfortune for Charles Leclerc, he moves up into second in the Drivers' Championship just behind Max. Exactly what that team wants him to do and what they pay him to do, and you got to hand it to him. It was great. Christian said this may have been the biggest 1-2 the team's had in years, at least since the 2010s, and I would agree with him. It was a big result.
Yeah, I mean, it's the best. It's the result that the team want, not necessarily the result Sergio wants. I'm sure he was thinking, Max, this is my opportunity. As I've said before, if you get an opportunity, you take it, because the only opportunity is really going to be allowed to win, so to speak, is if Max is out of the picture. And
that's
he was hoping he would be. You know, I'm sure when he saw Max closing up, he was like, really? But I mean, comparison wise, Max had handed it to him this weekend. And he finished behind him, but he was like 18 seconds behind him.
Yeah, quite a ways behind.
That's not the gap you really want. Luckily for them, there wasn't anyone to stuff a car in between them. Right? Anyone good enough anyway. So I wouldn't say it was Sergio's best weekend. It was certainly a great weekend for Red Bull. But I think, he probably left something on the table that he's going to be regretting just there a little bit. Yeah,
he did exactly what the team needed him to do, finish second, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what he needed to do. But that's not where he wanted to finish, for sure. And I think even after the race, he said, look, I mean, it's good. It's a great team result, got ahead of Ferrari. That's what we wanted to do. But he said, but the gap to Max, we need to look at that. And, that bothers him. It'd bother any driver. It bothered Bottas with Hamilton. It's going to bother any driver. And so they're gonna want to look at that. But I think, but a good weekend for Sergio nonetheless. Finishing second, moving into second in the Drivers' Championship is a good weekend for him. Let's talk about not so good weekend. Ferrari, Charles Leclerc down in P6, Carlos Sainz in P3. Unfortunately for Carlos, he did lead the race for a bit, but couldn't keep the Red Bulls behind him. Such was the degradation, Paul. He said the degradation rates that Ferrari were experiencing, and especially on his car, were they were not expecting that. He didn't do anything wrong. It's just that, and I really don't feel like the team did anything wrong with his strategy per se. He just couldn't find the pace to keep Sergio behind him. Such was the pace delta between the Ferrari and Red Bull, or at least in Carlos's hands. Carlos said he had a lot of tire heat issues and degradation. He was fighting, but he also nearly lost the podium trying hard to keep recovering George Russell behind him there, finishing just a couple of seconds behind Carlos. So lucky to be on that podium in the long run, but a lot of degradation on his car he wasn't expecting.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's done in the engineering room, obviously. And if they're not suspecting it at all, it's not something they're ready to manage. So, sometimes if you know that is an inherent issue on your car, then you can kind of address it. It may take a bit of the edge off it, but at least you don't have to deal with those issues during the race. So it being a surprise is a bit more worrying than the actual event itself, should I say.
Right. They certainly didn't anticipate, and the heat, the temperature was warmer than they kind of experienced all weekend. Save versus maybe some time on Friday, but yeah, they weren't expecting that. For Charles,
wasn't it earlier that was kind of like their strong point a few races ago, that they were able to make the tires better, but
I think it probably doesn't like warm weather as much. I think the Mercedes does. The Mercedes likes that warm weather to get heat in the tires. But for Charles, look, he recovered from P15. Took him longer than it did for Max to get back up into the top 5. He got up to P5. And this is now where you could start throwing a few darts at Ferrari about strategy. The team chose to bring him in for a fresh set of soft tires in order to try to get the fastest lap, but that backfired, losing a place to Alonso because he had a dodgy sensor apparently that created a speeding penalty after the race into the pit lane. So this gives him a penalty that drops him down to P6. So in an attempt for one single point, he lost 2 in the championship, and not a good deal. And it's also kind of, I don't know, I'm not there. I didn't hear all of the radio comms. I'm not in the team with Laurent Mekies, but it did seem like the team, I'm not quite sure where they were throwing all these different tire options at Charles. They have the math, right? They see the data, and I'm kind of thinking that they probably would know, but they were throwing a lot of options, and there was this really cynical part of my brain thinking, are they doing this for optics to say, well, we let the driver choose, and what's going on there?
I think because of all the issues they've had with the decisions they've made, they don't have a lot of confidence, and I'm sure Charles has been raising the roof in the debriefs. And I think it's just a kickback from that, where they don't want to make the wrong decision, so they're throwing the decision back to him.
That's what I was wondering. Is that what they're doing?
But that's not the fix. The fix is to make the decisions right in that room and allow your driver the right information to do his best, his or her best they can do with your strategy. Not to sit there discussing with the driver about strategy. I mean, there's sometimes you may be querying about it, but I think it really is a direct result from all the bad decisions they've made this year, that they're just trying to kind of hedge their bets. They're not confident, or it's been discussed with Charles that he's going to have the last call on some of these decisions while he's in the car, which isn't a good idea, I don't think.
I mean, that's how I read it, Paul, and I don't want to overreact on this, but I think Lewis and Mercedes is a good example of, there were several times where Lewis, maybe in his head, wasn't 100% convinced by what he was feeling on the track. But he acquiesced to Bono, and he did the team. And sometimes it caught him out. Sometimes it didn't work, and that pissed him off. And he'd say, in the press, he was, in his mind, he wasn't comfortable. I think Carlos had a couple of those moments with Ferrari. There are times, to your point. But by and large, that team should have that strategy nailed down and be confident in it, and the driver should feel confident and trust the team that they're making the right call. Now, that doesn't always happen 100%, but I have to suggest on Sunday, Paul, that you or Ian wasn't on the radio to Maxime saying, I don't know, what do you want to do? You want to change tires? You want just rights only? What do you want? Do you think you're out of gas? What do you want to do? I just don't see you guys doing that.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. With the strategy runs what it is. So the only thing you get feedback from driver is, how's the car in dirty air? And, do you feel like if we can get you in clean air, you can get this certain lap time, things like that. So I
have to also think that you would have the same conversation where you may be asking, okay, how the tires feel? Can I get another lap out of these? Can I get a couple more laps out of these?
Yeah, we generally we kind of know. Where we're at with them. Those discussions are done before you go out there on the track, not during the time you're on the track. How to get the best performance out of the qualifying tire, etc. How to take care of the tire. Let's turn up the track control. Let's take care of the rear tires. All that
Right.
stuff it's all discussed before that this is what we're going to do if we're trying to do this. And so
Right.
there's no surprises, not a lot of conversation back and forth.
Yeah.
So to
I
speak.
think sometimes there's those out of nowhere strategy changes, and it's like, ooh, if we could get another lap or two out of these, we could go for this strategy change. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it just seemed like they were throwing a lot over to Charles,
Yeah.
throwing a lot of that over the fence at him. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I was expecting him to come back and say, well, you tell me. He didn't, but I thought he may have. So I thought that was a little weird. All that to say, though, and it pains me to say this as a Ferrari fan, at this point, I think a long shadow is being cast over the Italian team for the remainder of the season, and a series of reliability issues. And to be fair, unforced errors by Charles and some serious strategy miscalls have led to what is amounting to a very challenging season for them. And they if they have any hope, they've got to turn it around this weekend. Otherwise, I think
I really don't think there is any.
Yeah, I
but,
don't know that there is.
but
Max has damn near got 100 points on him.
Yeah, but you need to stop the rot now.
Yes.
So that even if you can't achieve that championship this year, you stop making these errors. So
You stop the decay.
Start with a clean sheet next year.
Yeah.
You are in the right place. You got to keep learning by your mistakes. You can't just start floundering. But also, it's back to Charles. I mean, to be truth, I mean, that extra pit stop was tough for him. I mean, that certainly didn't help him skiving through the pack like
it's asking a lot.
Was.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's, what is it, the windshield visor gate? Because I guess the tear off from Verstappen's when
he planned it. They planned it. They knew if they would go into the break.
Exactly what he was going to do. So that put him on.
I'm
the
a
back
Ferrari
foot
fan. Come on.
For sure.
That didn't.
But I really don't like this fastest lap dipping in. I think that was too risky maneuver. I think they would, once again, it's just a bad decision because it put him right with Alonso, and he's the last person.
I know.
You want to then have to, if anything goes a little bit wrong, you do not want to have to be fighting with Alonso.
Yeah, I asked
in
Lewis.
the last 3 laps of a race. I mean, it's just, Alonso doesn't care you're going for fastest lap or an extra point. He will race you till he can't race you anymore. That's
right.
Exactly what happened. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, Alonso passed him. He could have said, well, Charles is going fast lap. I'll just back off and let him do it. No, he didn't. And you know what he got for it? He got a better position at the end of the race.
He did.
Because Charles got a penalty. If he didn't fight that hard and he'd let Charles by and said, he's just faster, he wouldn't have actually gained that position in the race. It's exactly why Alonso pushes all the time.
All the time. Yeah. That is not, he's not a driver to be trifled with.
No,
he just isn't.
He really doesn't care what your agenda is.
He doesn't care. He's not, he couldn't care less. Oh, it's Matt. Couldn't care less. He's that guy.
Nope.
So it's tough. It is tough. And I agree with, I'm kind of that point now, I think, with the fastest lap. I'd rather get a point for pole position than I do fast lap, to be honest with you. I'm with you.
Just the whole.
You said that. I'm taking credit for it, but you said that, and I agree with you.
Yeah, and I think a team decision to do that. I mean, so much can go wrong in a pit stop. So much.
Yeah.
You can throw a finish away with a bad, with a wonky nut.
Yeah.
So I personally wouldn't do it. I understand points are valuable, but at this point, he's so far ahead that ain't gonna help you.
No.
So.
All right, well, let's talk about Mercedes. I brought him up, mentioned a couple times. Lewis Hamilton, DNF, George Russell, a P4. Lewis had a good start, clash with Alonso at the end of Kimmel Straight at Lacombe. I would say kind of shut the door there a little bit on the Spaniard, tossing the Mercedes up in the air, eventually retiring it due to damage. Lewis admitted it was his fault. And Alonso had a pretty scathing review of Lewis's performance on the radio. But I kind of felt I was expecting, if I'm honest, a penalty for that, causing a collision. I kind of was. I was a little surprised there wasn't. I was thinking if this was Ocon on Ricardo, if it was Joe on Gasly, would there have been a penalty? I don't know. I'll let you guys argue that. But I kind of felt, here's the reason is is because everyone lately, for whatever reason, I don't know, it just seems like the last couple of years, it's consistency, damn it. Doesn't matter. If you're over the white line, you're over the white line. I don't care if he doesn't gain it so much on that corner. You're over the white line, we're looking for consistency, right? Okay, well, if you cause a collision, there's a penalty, all right? I did have some people say, well, yeah, but since he retired, it probably no, Tiger. You don't penalize outcomes. Either it's a penalty for causing the collision or it's not. I don't care if both of them retired or if both of them went on to win the race. Doesn't matter, right? You can't get into this habit of penalizing outcomes, right?
Right. No.
So it's either a penalty or it's not. Now, if that's not a penalty, I don't have much of an issue with it. But I don't want to see the penalty for the same damn thing later on this year.
No, we definitely don't want to see that. And I think they give him a little bit more rope on the opening laps.
On first lap. Should they? I don't know. It's either a penalty or it's not.
But it's been, they should, because they've kind of laid that out as a parameter.
Yeah.
Right? Because.
But if I'm Alonso, I'm thinking, okay, then first lap,
sure.
I'm going for it. The hell with it. Right?
Yeah. No, I think I think it was too close to not being a contact that I wouldn't have called it a penalty unless there was a penalty just for any contact whatsoever.
Yeah.
I think it was racing. I think it was, driving into the corner. I think Lewis kind of, obviously he's the one activating the contact because he's pinching Alonso in, not giving him room. I think he was, you go into those situations and you're kind of cutting across in the hopes that guy is going to back off sometimes, or assuming they're going to, or if you always think they're never going to back off, then you'll never pass anybody to some degree, right? There's always a bit of percentage of risk when you make a pass.
Yeah.
And to execute the pass, he really needed to come back over, else he was going to be in no man's land when they came to the left-hand side.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So for him to execute, it was an aggressive maneuver. Yeah, I just don't see it was a mistake big enough to warrant a penalty. There was a little bit of contact, and
I don't think it was a crime of the century either, Paul.
No, because I think if Lewis hadn't have been out of the race, no one would be talking about penalty at all. I really think actually the outcome made this contact a much bigger thing than it actually was. It was a little glimmer of touch, but it was a spectacular outcome. But I don't think the actual racing and the actual contact was a penalty enough issue.
Yeah, he had this same sort of incident at Lacombe with Nico a few years ago. Broke Nico's wing.
But that was coming back to the left, and that was sticking your nose in where you knew exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
This was more just
Lewis was a little more forward.
You just elbows out, and I can't fault him for it. I mean, it was his fault because he closed in a little bit, but I'm just not.
Yeah, he pinched him. Lewis said, "Look, it's my fault. I should have left him more room. I thought I did, and I didn't. And I should have left him a little more room." And I think that's a fair assessment. I do. Yeah. I think even Lewis would agree with that.
Yeah. You know what the funny thing was, though, that I found hilarious, was when Alonso got in that same position, and I can't remember who was inside him. I can't remember when it was, but coming into the same place, he was trying to pass on the outside. And Alonso basically went down 3 gears and stopped and pulled in behind. And I was like, that is not Alonso. And the only reason you're doing that is to once again emphasize the fact of what happened with Hamilton was terrible. And, you know, he's he don't knows the lead from the front. I mean, Alonso gets carried away with his verbal abuse for sure. But I was watching, I was like, that is not Alonso. He literally just bailed out, and any other lap, any other situation, Alonso would have been fighting around the outside.
Even fighting around the outside, not checking up and tucking in behind. Yeah. That's
like,
not Alonso.
Boom, boom, boom. Go ahead, my friend. I'll pull in behind you.
Here, have the corner. Yeah, that's not Alonso. No, I don't feel like it was crime of the century. I think Lewis, I think he pinched him a little bit. He probably didn't give him enough room. But they're going for second place. And look, if I'm Lewis, I'm pissed off the whole weekend. I'm 1.8 seconds off the Red Bull pace. I'm not happy camping camper. I'm not a happy bunny, and I'm trying to make something happen, right? And I have maybe a little bit more of issue of Lewis's 2 altercation with Alex Albon than I do this one. I think this one is.
Oh,
is-
yeah.
yeah. I think this one is, kind of like you said,
Not
it's
even in the
racing
same.
but I'm
league.
just saying, I was expecting, all the outrage online. No, it's cut and dried. You cause a collision, it's a penalty,
Yeah.
and there was no penalty.
Yeah.
Okay, then that is the precedent. Then I don't want to see this going forward for the rest of the season. If we aren't going to call these, and I'm okay with that because I don't think it was that big of a crime, then I don't want to see it for the rest of the season on the first lap. I really don't.
No, because I think if you start calling that stuff, no one will be able to race. And we go back and forth with this, though, right? It ebbs and flows all the time where the stewardship goes tight and then it gets loose and tight and loose.
I know.
Figure it out. But
that's what I'm saying.
I would rather it be a little looser.
Me too.
But figure it out so people can get away with those things and not, have to go to the tribunal.
I'm the same way on the white lines. You and I've talked to this. There are corners you can go over the white line and you're not gaining an advantage. And the FIA know it. All right. So let's not, get ahead of ourselves here. Yes. Let's not overcomplicate it here. The drivers know damn well where they gain an advantage and where they don't, and so does the race director.
Yep.
So let's not get carried away of anything over the white line, except for the pit exit. I do believe you need to stay on the white line there.
Yeah.
That's a given. All right. So there's Lewis's race. It's unfortunate because the only reason I think it was a bit of a come on, man, because I really felt like Lewis probably could have been on the podium.
Right. Well, definitely a missed opportunity.
Yeah. It was a missed opportunity. Yeah. And it's not something that you expect from Lewis. And he's frustrated. He's pissed, man. I got deference for him. I do. Let's talk about George, though. On the other side of that coin, here is George Russell, who, and I'm not taking the stuffing out of Lewis, folks. The Team LH, give me a break here. I'm just telling you, you have to commend the job that George is doing this year. He is doing a fantastic job. He actually showed what I think was possible for Lewis if he'd have stayed in the race, and had a clean, challenge. And I think he had maybe an opportunity for a podium at the end of the race. George was running a clean race, finished a couple seconds behind Carlos. Carlos struggling with a lot of degradation. I feel like that was a terrific job by George. It was a great job at keeping out of trouble, finding the pace in those warmer temperatures, got that temperature in his tire, made the most of it, challenged Carlos there at the very end, kept him honest, and ends up securing a P4, and he's fifth in the championship, right? So George is just continuing that consistency that Lewis has struggled with, because whether it's out of frustration or trying to make something happen, I don't know, but George has been consistent.
He has. He's kind of the guy that any team would be more than happy to have. I mean, you're talking about Verstappen maturity. He has a ton of it. I mean, you don't see any erratic maneuver. I mean, we've seen a couple, but right now he knows the opportunity's in. He's making the most of it, and he's clocking out the laps. He's counting out the points.
Yeah.
He's super impressive by how he works with the team on developing the car, how he runs the race, and his outright speed. So it's hard to judge, is he the best driver, versus Leclerc versus Hamilton, whatever. Hard to say because of where that team is and where other teams are. But there's no doubt that he's definitely one of the best drivers on the grid. He's kind of, he's like an Alan Prost kind of guy to me.
Yeah. He's
super intelligent, super fast.
Yeah.
He doesn't make erratic decisions out there. I mean, he's just
consistent as hell.
I mean, he's taking that opportunity to be at that top team and running with it really fast.
That's a great point, Paul. And you said it far better than I did. He is making the absolute most out of this opportunity. He really is. And, look, I'm not prepared to say, oh, he's so much better than Lewis. But look, there is an element that all you have to measure yourself is your teammate. So right now he's leading Lewis by 24 points. He's been more consistent. He's been driving an intelligent race. I could actually chalk a lot of the ebb and flow of Lewis just out of frustration because Lewis is a 7-time champion. I think he's frustrated, and I think he's trying to make something happen there, and a maybe a little frustration creeping in. But I think George, to your point, is making the absolute most out of this. He is, and he is there with Lando and Max and those guys, and he's driving at an incredible level that I think a lot of people are overlooking. I really do.
Yeah. I bet
They shouldn't be.
no one on the grid is overlooking it. I promise you that. If people outside of the will, but
Yeah.
I promise you, everyone in
Yeah,
the pit
agreed.
lane knows
They
what
know.
he's doing.
Yeah, they knows what he's doing and what he's delivering, and it's a lot in that car. Just ask Lewis. Let's talk about Alpine. Out of nowhere, Alpine. Fernando Alonso, P7. Esteban Ocon. Did I get that right? No, other way
No,
around.
the other way around.
P5. Esteban Ocon, P7. Sorry about that. Alpine looked quick, though, all weekend. They really did. Alonso started third place because you had those grid penalties. So he was excited, and he was always going to be in the mix, starting up that high. He had a great start, Paul, running in P2 because Sergio had a bad start. So you can understand he's pretty pissed off when Lewis squeezed him, right? I mean, he was running in P2, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so he was hit by Lewis, got squeezed by Lewis, had that scathing response. Look, you know, two things. I don't know. Lewis got a little cagey with after the race, saying that, you know, he's not going to apologize and whatever. It's heat of the moment. Alonso's pissed. I get it. Thankfully for Fernando, though, he didn't pick up any damage like Lewis did. He was able to continue the race and finish in fifth after inheriting that space because of Ferrari trying to get that one extra point for Leclerc. That didn't work out, so that he inherited that. P5, good result. Just a cagey, cheeky Alonso this weekend. He was excited. He was pretty amped up.
Yeah, given the opportunity, absolutely. I mean,
He's there.
yeah. I mean, the Alpines making quite a go of it, aren't they?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
to coming into the season, you'd be like, well, you know, they'll be lucky if they can even sniff, you know, at McLaren's heels, and yet now they're ahead of him in the championship, which is mind blowing, really. I mean, that's good going, and if they show the speed and can be consistent with that speed, then you know that is a marked progress from previous seasons, I think. And Alonso's always going to make the most of a situation.
Always,
he always is. So I mean, but if you give him a shot at the real sharp end of the field, then you know, don't look back. You know.
Yeah. He's going to go there. He's going to be there.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, you know, to your point, Alpine in total, right? Ocon had good penalties himself. Recovery drive all the way to P7, inspiring drive from Esteban. Perhaps for my money, the most inspiring moment of the race was his pass of the two cars on Kemmel Straight. It really smacked to that Haken and Schumacher pass of yore. It was a brilliant move down there. A great race by Esteban. He had a lot of good passing over the course of that race that were as impressive as hell. A big points haul. And as you mentioned, Paul, it places Alpine's foot squarely on the neck of the best of the rest in the championship ahead of McLaren. It really does. And, you know, look, you can guff haw and laugh and hoo-hoo, Otmar got, you know, stonewalled by Alonso, ha, ha, ha. Look, Alpine is starting to have glimpses of recovery and development. This is heading in the right direction. They are ahead of McLaren. They are in best of the rest. And you cannot knock Otmar, and more to the point, Alan Permain and all the folks, men and women of that team and the work they're doing.
It sure juices up this whole driver contract dispute. It's like, oh, you really want to get bought out of a team that's actually beating the team you want to go to?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Makes it interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting indeed. Aston Martin, Lance Stroll P11, Sebastian Vettel P8. Sebastian had a good race, worked his way through the field, some decent battles back in the field, held his own, finished in P8. I just thought it was a good, solid race from Seb.
Yeah, no, he was very lively. I mean, he was right in the thick of it. If the Alpine hadn't been so good here, I think, you know, he would have been searching for that fifth, sixth place as well. I think he was definitely in the hunt the whole weekend long, and definitely in the race. So it was great to see him out there fighting like that.
Yeah, it was. Let's see. Also at Aston Martin, Lance Stroll. got
he is
punted
also
by
there.
Vettel. He is also in that team. He got ran out a little wide by
He
Seb
did
there.
a little
You see
bit,
that?
yeah. But we've seen Stroll try to do that too. There's no, I doubt there's any love lost between those two at this point. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was. Why is Vettel going to let him go by? I mean, basically, if Vettel had given him the room, then Stroll would have been by, and you go on the outside for someone, and that's a risk. And I think Vettel fought hard like he would fight anybody else, and it just happened to be Stroll.
Happened to be Lance.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Ferrigno, as I like to call
yeah, he was he was running in the points after his stop. He got caught though, unfortunately, as did a lot of drivers in that DRS train behind Albon, and just could not get back there. And it's a testament to Alex, and I'll get to that later in the review. But anyway, that's what happened. Despite that, I do think Spa flattered this car and their pace. That was good. Even their qualifying was quick, so it was a good weekend. Their goal this weekend was to score points on both cars. Narrowly missed that, but overall, I'd say a decent weekend for the team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think Vettel showed you what it was capable of. So.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about, get a refill there. AlphaTauri. Pierre Gasly, P9, Yuki Tsunoda, P13. Both cars started from the pit lane, and one notion that PDR made on the Sky broadcast, Paul DeRessa said during the qualifying, he said, hey, do you think that AlphaTauri may take engines this weekend just so they could also now, after qualifying, move behind Max and free up that space? And they were like, well, that's a... I'm not saying that's what they did, but PDR said it. But at the end of the day, they did take engine components. It moved them out of the way, moved them. Both of them started the pit lane. And but having said that, whether that was the reason or not, it worked. Both left them a lot of work to do. And I got to go back and look at the race again because I'm not entirely sure I understand how Pierre got from the pit lane up into the points, but he did. Back up to P9. Great job. It was his 100th Grand Prix. Had great battles back there with Vettel and Ocon on the way through the field. He was really excited about that race, his 100th race, and was excited to come from the pit lane to P9. So good result.
Yeah, I mean, something we would have expected of Gasly a while back.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Recent form, right? But so good for them. I don't know. I guess it's something that could happen. It's certainly happened before where, the association with those two teams is pretty obviously joined at the hip that they would do that. But I'd also think Red Bull and Max have enough confidence where they say they don't need those handouts. But could be wrong. Could be easily wrong.
Who knows?
Yeah.
May have been a call. It said France. Yeah, it's helmet. Yeah, take engine penalties. Done. The Ukester started on the hards. That strategy didn't really work out for him, unfortunately. Couldn't get back up into the points after he stopped. Like Stroll, he got stuck in that DRS train too. Couldn't get back up there. So finished down in a lonely P13. Let's talk about Williams. Yes, Williams. Alex Albon, a brilliant P10. Nicholas Latifi, a less brilliant P18. Alex started 6th. He was out of position. That gave him a good chance, though, to nab some points, which he did, but only losing 1 place, really. To be fair, he only lost 1 place to Ricciardo kind of at the first part of the race. So, the Williams had the legs here at this track. It flattered that car and their straight line speed. So good straight line speed. He was able to recover some places after his 2-stopper, clawed his way back into the points. And, let's be fair. He was out of position, couldn't hold off the midfield teams as they came back through, but he did manage to hold 10th place. And that's awesome for Williams. That gave the team a point. And you could say, well, he had that DRS, but Alex said, look, we were all in the DRS, but I had massive degradation. So I was driving my butt off to hold them back.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, that takes a lot of management because even if DRS was powerful. We saw that there. So you cannot just drive around nonchalantly, even if you have a bit of a straight line speed. You've got to measure every time you're coming out of La Source, going into Eau Rouge and Radion to make sure everything's perfect and the power delivery is coming on at the right time to hold them off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Latifi caused the safety car period by running wide, got in the gravel, spun, punted Bottas off the track. Nicholas stopped for a new front wing and came home at the back in P18. Enough said there.
Rookie spin too.
Yeah, it was. McLaren, Lando Norris, P12, Daniel Ricciardo, P15. Not a race to brag about for McLaren, and that's a shame because there were moments like Ricciardo's running into the points early on, got stuck in the DRS drain after his stop, and out of the points said he couldn't. I don't know what the deal was. Said we had pace and clean air, just didn't have clean air. So I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe this is the reason he's getting canceled. I don't know.
I finished 15th because I was slower.
Yeah.
That would be a good one.
Yeah.
Why did you finish 15th? That wasn't as quick as the other 14 ahead of me. Yeah.
Pace didn't. I never had clean air.
Yeah.
Okay. Norris started at the back with grid penalties, tried like hell to get back up to the front, just didn't have the pace really to get there. Suffered also in some DRS drains of his own. Tough weekend for the team given the loss. Significant ground to Alpine in the Constructors' Championship with both cars out of the point. That hurts.
Yeah, that does hurt.
Yeah.
This is pretty disastrous.
Yeah.
I mean, at least Norris has been notched in some points even when Ricciardo struggled. But yeah, for them both to be way back where they are, that's something they definitely want to forget about. But not forget about and try and figure out how to not let that happen again because they can't afford that.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, also Zach Brown's got to write a check for $24 million just to get rid of Ricardo. He said, unfortunately, we didn't have enough performance clauses in the contract, so I got to write a check. So, ouch. Bad weekend.
Ouch. Yeah.
Yeah. Alfa Romeo, Bottas, bad weekend. DNF, not of his own making. That would be one Nicholas Latifi punting him wide. He was out of the race. Zhou Guanyu in P14. Zhou actually looked kind of competitive despite having started at the back with grid penalties. Made some good progress towards the points, but in the end, even though he had a good battle with Yuki, he just didn't have the pace to get to the points. But I thought it was a tidy race and a good battle, though.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah. I mean, obviously we know the mid pack is tight, so it wasn't anything to be embarrassed by, I don't think.
Yeah, for sure.
And the potential of the car with Bottas where he could have been a point scoring car, quite honestly, but obviously he got Latifi'd and that was the end of that. Yeah.
And nobody wants to get Latifi'd.
Nobody.
There's no cure for that. There's no antibiotics you can get when you're Latifi'd. Let's see, and then Haas, man, this track did not flatter this team.
No.
He had Schumacher P17 and Kevin Magnussen P16. Kevin started well up the order because of cars out of position due to penalties, but then he dropped back during his first stop. Unfortunately, did not have the pace to recover from that stop, and then Mick managed to get by Latifi, so there's that. But that was about it. It's unfortunate. But it was kind of clear on Friday that Spa just wasn't going to flatter this team, and they knew it going into the weekend. So not a lot to talk about there. Let's hand out some awards, shall we? The first award is Move of the Race. Woo! That's right, Paul. What'd you have? Move of the Race.
I got Ocon, but not for the move you said. I like the one where he passed Ricciardo and Latifi coming through Blanchiment into the bus stop. I thought that was a fantastic run to the outside. I mean, he had to really finish it off on the outside of the entry to the bus stop, which was tough. So once again, it was eyes up, cool head, and saw what was coming, and just kept his momentum going, and it shoved him all the way ahead of those two guys before he even got to the second part of the bus stop there.
Yeah, well, it's a Ocon-orific award because I gave it to Ocon too for his pass on the Kimmel Straight around the two cars, shades of Mika Hakkinen on Schumacher, and I enjoyed that. I thought it was a great move.
Yep,
a lot of fun to watch down there.
Mine had no DRS implications.
That's right, mine did. Yeah, I know. Speaking of, let's talk about Donkey of the Race. Ooh.
We'll do it live.
All right, Paul. Donkey of the Race. Who are you giving it to?
I'm giving it to the Ferrari going for fastest lap deal. I think it was a bad error, and it came out even worse than they'd imagined. So I don't think it was the time or place to try that. I really don't.
I agree.
It went wrong. Yeah,
it went very wrong. Yeah, I'm going to give it to Lewis not because I thought it was a crime's worst, the century's worst crime. I had you in my fantasy GP picks on the podium, damn it, Lewis. Wanted to see him up there. I think he could have got there if he just didn't get into a kerfuffle. It's Alonso. You know better.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm P8 now, I think, in the fantasy thing.
Oh, I think I must be last.
I keep climbing.
I am so bad this year, Paul. I did real well last year. I was in what was I last year?
3 or 4, maybe.
Yeah. So, and this year it's just miserable. I'm in the last. So
you're having a Ricardo season.
I am. I think you guys are going to drop me. And I've got a contract, but I think you guys had a performance clause. You and Grace are going to drop me on this.
Yeah,
too.
definitely not giving you 24.
It's terrible. All right, drive of the race. Good God. Oh yeah.
Get down.
Get in there, Lewis.
All right, Paul. Drive the race. I handed it to Max.
Yeah, we've got to be in agreement,
Max?
right?
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Sublime.
Great run. I say Ocon had a great run. Alonso did, but you can't. Sometimes you got to go with the guy that actually won the race.
Sometimes you got to give it to the guy that came from 14th to win the race by 18 seconds. Sometimes you got to do that. Yeah.
Yep.
So, all right. Let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
Let's see. Any chance, Paul, I put this in here just as a shout out. I don't think you'll ever have time to do them again, but just a little shout out. For those of you new to the podcast, every weekend, Paul used to do a quick podcast that would preview the track. And he said, hey, any chance you could do a quick review of the Spa weekend for this weekend? I missed the pre-race setup, and you did it so damn well. So anyway, thanks for the kind words.
I appreciate that. And I really like doing them, but it's really difficult right now.
It is difficult because Paul happens to be in a championship leading team. It's not like he's
got to keep my focus.
That's right. He's got a day job, man. Anyway, let's see. Vincent asked Todd Paul Grace, enjoyed your podcast for the last year. Now, well, thanks, Vincent. Appreciate you listening. And Formula One for the past few years, great. But I loved the racing since I was a child, yelling "Go Daddy" at racetracks, watching my dad race stock cars. Awesome. Nice. Late model modifieds and stuff. That's awesome. I'm now devouring all I can to understand the history of F1 and how the drivers, the cars, and the sports evolved. You old-timers mention particular races now and then and in passing for a specific effect. I wonder if you could share a list for noobs, at least maybe like a top 10 list of races any F1 fan should have seen or should watch, especially if you know it's on F1 TV. That's a great idea. And maybe I could get a list out of you and Grace from your time.
Yeah.
That would be fun to do.
Definitely something you want to think about. I don't just throw something out.
Yeah, I don't want to throw something off the
I know
top
one
of my head.
is
Spa
Dijon.
98.
No. Is Dijon with Villeneuve and
Renault
Arnoux battling out.
Yes. Yeah. Dijon, Villeneuve, Arnoux.
As a kid.
Yes.
And luckily I was a lucky kid. I had a VCR back when I was a kid. Not many people did. A Betamax though it was, and I had that race. We'd recorded it, and I literally sat there for days replaying that battle between those
epic.
two guys. And that, one of the things that I was inspired already. I wanted to be a race car driver, but that was just like blew me away. It was an amazing battle.
Yeah.
Definitely check that out, and I'll work on the other list.
Yeah, we'll have to put together a list because I'm thinking like, what was it? Schumacher, was it 96 in Spain or 90? Unbelievable.
Schumacher. In the rain
in the rain. Oh my gosh.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable what he pulled off.
Senna had a couple of moments.
Senna
like that
had
too,
those,
sure.
And Senna and Prost at Japan. We'll have to work on a list. Kind of, there's other lists out there, but just from a Parc Fermé list from.
And as always, because F1 and people have understood after they see the Netflix show, there's a lot more to it just watching the green flag drop. So there's a lot of context that goes into something we would pick, I'm sure. So we'll have to preface it with that. But there's the pressure of the moment, so to speak.
Yeah. And Vincent, if anyone else listening, if you're new to Formula One via Drive Survive, if you haven't yet, go to Netflix or wherever it's streaming and look at the documentary called Senna, because the producers of Drive Survive did the movie Senna. And if you have not watched Senna, run, don't walk, and watch that documentary about Senna. Okay, because if you love the whole flow of Drive Survive, very much the same producers and the same flow of Senna, a fantastic documentary about Ayrton Senna. If you haven't watched that, do so. But we'll work on that, Vincent. It's a great idea, buddy. I appreciate you listening to the podcast. Appreciate you offering that idea. So, and if there's any of you out listening that would have some ideas of stuff you'd like, maybe Paul, myself, or Grace to post, stories to write, or anything like that, let us know. It always helps. And I'm trying to work on more TPF stories. They just take a long time, and there was a lot of kind words about that podcast that I do that talks about
no,
the
it's
history.
good. I enjoyed it. Yeah, absolutely.
So, but you weren't surprised that I was born right next to the Armco plant that became such an iconic thing in Formula One, were you?
No.
So that's cool. If you haven't heard the TPF Stories podcast, go to our website, the Parc Fermé, scroll down in the center there. It says TPF Stories, and there's 4 of them that I've made. And they're just kind of fun second glances at the history of motorsport. So enjoy.
Yep.
Let's see. Steve asks, Max's win looked a bit too easy when you consider the Ferrari is supposed to have a comparable car, and Mercedes had apparently added a big upgrade. Both Ferrari and Mercedes look draggy to me. I guess my question is, how did both teams make such a big setup error when Spa is such a well-known track? Seems a little odd, especially when Williams went with a low downforce car and had great result with Albon. It's a great question, Steve. All I would say, the only thing, and I'll let Paul answer this because he'll be much more intelligent than I am on it, but the one thing I would say is they know Spa and they have tremendous amounts of data, but not for this year's car. So this year's car is a radical deviation from the data that they've known before. So the previous data will be helpful, but not as much as it would have been, had they had these regulation changes. But anyway, Paul, how'd they miss it?
Yeah, and it's not so easy. It's not set up. And everyone's just not starting with the same car, and some people are hitting the right setup with that car. The cars are so radically different. They have strong points and weak points, and they're built and designed for a whole season and to work it as best they can at all the circuits. And sometimes you will kind of take a step back and not have expectations on certain circuits what aren't going to suit your car, but on the whole your decision was made to give yourself the best opportunity to score as many points over a whole season. And they can't stop their car being draggy by doing something with setup. I mean, we know the extent of how expensive it is to design a car. Also, how you just can't radically change the DNA of the car in mid-season just for one race. We know the Red Bull is fast in a straight line, and yes, it showed a considerable weight in that respect at Spa, and it's going to. The other teams are still working on trying to get their cars as good as Red Bull. They're just not there yet, and some tracks the Red Bull strengths won't be as strong, so therefore those teams actually have a shot. But a place like this in Monza can be really tough, and teams go into it, as we've heard, doesn't matter what team, they go into a track going and say, yeah, this is probably not really going to suit us. It's not that they're going in there and say, well, we're just going to try a couple of setups and just not bother. It's that they inherently know the strengths and weaknesses of their car, so they know that in certain circuits they're just not going to be able to pull it off versus other circuits.
And Haas knew that coming into Spa.
Right.
Yeah. Haas knew it. You could see, I'm not saying that they're going to bounce back and win the Dutch Grand Prix, but you could see that delta get a little less for Ferrari at the Dutch Grand Prix, because that track may flatter Ferrari's car and chassis a little bit more. I'm not saying it'll be dominant over Red Bull, but you could see Mercedes at Hungaroring, right? That track just seemed to flatter that Mercedes a lot more than certainly
exactly.
Spa
It's
did,
not like Red Bull have dominated the season. They're obviously the best car, but there's certain circuits where Ferrari have, had a little bit of an edge, and this just wasn't one of them.
Then finally, Gigi the cat. Hey, Gigi the cat, long time,
Gigi the cat, yes,
huge
absolutely.
supporter of the Parc Fermé. We're incredibly grateful. He's a Patreon supporter and a delightful guy to chat with, and I love him, and he's awesome, and he's down under in the Great Southern Land. So great guy. Gigi the cat says unreliability and the penalties conundrum. Back in the day, we had a high level of unreliability. Most races were unpredictable. Along comes the Ferrari Dream Team and eventually set the standard in terms of a solid, reliable F1 car. That's true. We now are at an era where we have a little more unreliability compared to previous season. At least I perceive it this way. Do you think this car can get better managed instead of do you think this can be better managed instead of grid penalties? I'm sure before the season is out, someone will get a 35 plus spot penalty. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I mean, we kind of discussed it with the grid penalties, etc. It's not necessary that, you know, it's unfortunate and teams are going to try and eliminate, but they can't eliminate it completely. And it's really just a way of containing the spend and containing what manufacturers can and can't do. And basically buy themselves a championship. You know, if they could throw an engine at it every week, they would. So
yeah, I think also, and you're a student of the sport a long time, Gigi, and so you'll know this. But you remember back in the day when we had just the radical unreliability, and the engines were unreliable, the chassis were, you know, they were throwing a lot at it. Here's my hunch, and I could be wrong on this, but we may kind of see that reliability thing really crop up in 2026 when the new engines come, because that's when they're going to be really sort of piecing all that out. They run them on the dynos, of course, but we could see an increase in unreliability.
I think motor racing in general has just become more reliable.
Do you see that in IMSA too, right?
Absolutely. IMSA, Le Mans, you know, and
remember,
any
Paul,
of these 24-hour races.
The 24 hours are sprints.
Yeah, they're sprints. I mean, before you'd be like, okay, we're going to lower our rev down 500. We're going to slow shift. We're going to do this to get the car to last 24 hours. Now you're just like, we're just going, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so across the board, cars, motorsports have just evolved as they've gone with reliability, and the rules have been condensed so much that the teams can't experiment as much. So therefore the reliability is inherent in them. Because
when they're not
throwing prototype things at the car which is what we saw in the 80s, right? People were trying all kinds of stuff, and that led to more reliability because more things were just kind of just thrown together and like, hey, let's try this. Let's use that.
I remember there were no fuel regulation. They were running the most exotic fuels. I mean, in some of those engines, that fuel, they're burning like a little mini sun in there. It was so hot. You know, that fuel was burning so hot. So I think that's true. The regulations are so compact around a set of regulations that the reliability around those structures and mechanics and everything have become a lot more reliable. But to your point, and I think it was manifest in the endurance racing, because there was a time, you know, it's like overnight we're going to lift and coast, we're going to, you know, now those races run flat out sprint races 24 hours, and the winner wins by 30 some odd feet, you know, ahead of the number 2 player. It was like, whoa.
Right. I mean, when my dad won Daytona 24, they won by like 11 laps.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Now it's 11 seconds.
If you have 11-second gap, you feel like you dominated after 24 hours, you know?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. But a great question, Gigi, as always. Appreciate your support. All right. Well, that does it for this race, but you're going to get a whole heck of a lot of Paul and I, because we got a triple header, Paul. We've got the Dutch Grand Prix of Zandvoort next, and then we got the mighty Monza after that, which is always fun. So, so always great. Congratulations on leading the championship. We all have our fingers crossed heading into Petite. If you're not watching, Paul, you have to watch the Heart of Racing number 27 car, Aston Martin, leading the championship going into Petite. Also cheer for that number 23 car on the Pro Series. It's a great car too. And Paul and the team are doing a fabulous job, a great season. So be sure to watch and support them. Buy some gear, donate, support the Heart of Racing. They would appreciate it for sure. It's a great cause and a great team led by a wonderful, wonderful, delightful guy named Ian James. Just a prince of a guy and a dear friend of Paul. So anyway, support that team as always. And until next week, when we come back to do it all over again and review the Dutch Grand Prix, all in orange, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camper, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.